In the last episode, Ashya triumphs over the barbarians, but not without the crucial assistance of Carlisle and his men. Deeply grateful, she decides to personally thank him and goes to his room. Upon her arrival, Carlisle warmly invites her to take a seat. However, instead of sitting down, Ashya bows deeply, expressing her heartfelt thanks for his timely intervention. Noticing her formal demeanor, Carlisle can't help but tease her, asking, "Is it that awkward to even have a cup of tea with me? You seem ready to just say your piece and leave." Ashya, a bit flustered, responds that it's not about awkwardness. She simply believes that the sooner she expresses her gratitude and apology, the better. Carlisle, with a mischievous grin, counters that he prefers taking his time and savoring the moment, it's more enjoyable that way. He then gently insists that she join him for tea, an invitation Ashya accepts with a sense of honor. As they sit together, Carlisle remarks that they don't need to be so rigid with each other. While picking up the delicate teacup, Ashya wonders how such a fragile item managed to survive the journey to Pervaz without breaking. During their conversation, Carlisle suddenly asks if she's angry with him, explaining that although she never requested his help, he intervened on his own. Ashya, caught off guard, nervously denies any anger, saying, "How could I be angry with the person who saved my life?" She humbly admits that she was arrogant, acknowledging that if Carlisle hadn't blocked the rear army at that critical moment, they would have suffered devastating losses. Carlisle then questions Ashya's readiness for battle, asking, "Do you always go out prepared to die like that?" Ashya, in turn, asks, "Are there any warriors who don't prepare themselves for the possibility of death in battle?" Carlisle replies that he doesn't. With a sigh, Ashya admits that she usually does. Carlisle, with a hint of amusement, comments that he noticed, especially when he saw that she had left a will, practically encouraging her husband to have an affair. This jolts Ashya's memory, immediately reminding her of her parting words to Carlisle before the battle. Carlisle, with a thoughtful look, asks Ashya, "If you love Pervaz so much, shouldn't you hope that your descendants will continue the reign of Count Pervaz?" Ashya, ever straightforward, responds without hesitation, "I don't necessarily want my descendants to inherit it. Anyone who leads with a sense of responsibility can do so." Carlisle, intrigued by her perspective, counters, "But you've earned honor through the sacrifices of your father and brothers. Isn't it unfair for someone else's descendants to take what they've fought so hard for?" Ashya meets his gaze and rhetorically asks, "Was the title of Count Pervaz that my father received truly an award? The choice given to him was to either take his own life or stand against the Lur people with the readiness to die." She then questions, "Is there really an honor that should be passed down to descendants? I don't know, but I do hope that this place is no longer treated as a place of exile. The people of Pervaz have performed the noble task of protecting the borders of the empire." Carlisle, visibly impressed, admits with a hint of surprise, "I didn't realize the Pervaz army was that strong. I didn't expect it." Ashya, still grateful, thanks Carlisle again, acknowledging that without his help, she would have faced disastrous consequences. Carlisle, with a playful grin, downplays his role, saying, "I just did what was necessary. If Pervaz's army were destroyed, I would be in even more trouble." Sensing the conversation winding down, Ashya asks, "Do you have anything more to say?" Carlisle simply replies, "No, I don't have anything else." With that, Ashya stands up and requests to leave. After exiting Carlisle's room, her thoughts swirl. She wonders if Carlisle had forgotten to say something at the end or if he really helped them without expecting anything in return. Eventually, she concludes that even such a gesture could be his way of imposing a debt on her. A few days later, within the grand halls of the imperial palace, Marries and Beatrice engaged in a tense discussion about the recent barbarian attack on Pervaz. Marries, with a furrowed brow, expressed his concern over how Carlisle and his forces managed to eliminate the invading barbarians. Beatrice, however, dismissed his worries with a wave of her hand, stating, "It's not that big of a deal. The Luo people are nearly extinct, and those who attacked this time were from a minor tribe, the Igram tribe. Besides, these are people we should be thankful for." Marries, immediately suspicious, asked, "Did they win?" Beatrice's expression turned somber as she replied, "Unfortunately, the surprise attack failed." Disappointment clear in his voice, Marries exclaimed, "Then what exactly are we thankful for?" Sensing his growing anxiety, Beatrice questioned, "Why are you suddenly so worried?" Marries, his voice laced with unease, replied, "You can never predict what they'll do next. If the monster emerges, we'll have to drag him back. We need to get that Carlisle guy out of Pervaz, quickly." Rising to her feet, Beatrice reassured him, "There's no need to fret. Mother has already devised a plan to strip Carlisle of his power." A wicked smile spread across her face as she announced, "We're going to incite another war in Pervaz." Marries, perplexed, asked, "Why provoke barbarian attacks on Pervaz just to weaken Carlisle? If he repels them, it only strengthens his position." Beatrice, smirking, explained, if Pervaz is under constant attack, other nobles will be reluctant to visit, most supply ships will be cut off, and informants won't be able to come and go freely. Macius, catching on, speculated further, then Carlisle will feel isolated and uneasy, leaving him with no choice but to come to the capital. Beatrice, with a chilling nonchalance, remarks, it would be even better if Carlisle were killed by the barbarians' arrows. Macius, showing a rare moment of empathy, hesitates and says, isn't that a bit too much? His mother, however, swiftly dismisses his concern. Don't be scared, Macius. If Carlisle dies, you won't have to go to war at all. After all, you're the only one who can become prince, so there's no way they'd send you to a dangerous battlefield. Beatrice continues, her tone sharper, what's more pressing is Carlisle's rising popularity in social circles. We need to erase his presence and bring him back to the capital before it's too late. With a calculated move, Beatrice signs a contract that promises supplies to the Igram tribe, ensuring they can sustain a prolonged conflict. She then informs Macius that they are not alone in this plot. High Priest Gabriel is also aligned with their agenda. Gabriel will be working closely with them to ensure everything goes according to plan. Later, Gabriel receives the signed contract from Beatrice and prepares to head to the secret meeting location with other priests. Priest Geronimo, who serves as the secretary of the Golden Bough Fraternity, greets him with an apology for the sudden change of venue. Gabriel, unbothered, responds, it's not your fault, Geronimo. The temple leadership's compromises with the secular world and their oppression of our fraternity are to blame. As the other priests gather, their concerns about being treated like heretics by the temple leadership come to the forefront. Gabriel, with a resolute expression, reassures them, do not worry too much. In the end, we will be the victors. Libato will protect us. In the early morning at Pervaz Castle, Ashya was in a hurry after receiving an unexpected summons from Carlisle. As soon as she entered his room, Carlisle greeted her with a warm, good morning, and casually explained, I called you because I thought we could spend some time together, after all, we are married. Noticing the gloom in Ashya's expression, Carlisle asked, what's wrong? Do you not want to be with me? Not even for a moment. Ashya quickly responded, I would never think that. But is there something you're trying to tell me through this? I'm just worried I might not understand. Carlisle, with a calm demeanor, remarked, I've heard that people in Pervaz don't talk back, so I hope you'll listen to what I have to say. With an intense gaze, Ashya questioned, so, are you saying that as a couple, we should just spend time together? That's all. Carlisle, with a faint smile, replied, it's been 3 months since I arrived in Pervaz, yet I haven't had the chance to have a proper conversation with you. Ashya, bowing her head in agreement, said, I would also like that. Carlisle stood up and added, but it won't be fun just sitting and talking. It would be nice if you personally showed me around the castle. Ashya agreed, and as they strolled through the castle, Carlisle observed, the work on the second floor was completed a while ago. I should mention this before it's too late, the management is a bit lacking. Ashya, not wanting to offend him, replied, shouldn't you have told me something like that earlier? Still, the residents of the castle have kept it very clean. As they continued their walk through the castle, Ashya couldn't help but notice the emptiness and neglect that had settled in. Seeing the state of the castle, she began to understand why Carlisle's men were so shocked upon their arrival. She explained to Carlisle, because of the war, no one had the time or energy to properly care for the castle. To survive the winter, we sold whatever little we had or used it as firewood. She continued, her voice tinged with sadness, the Lur tribe set fire to all the mountains that had trees, so we couldn't gather firewood. During the war, we burned dressing tables and grandfather clocks to keep warm, they weren't needed at the time. Carlisle, recalling the tales he'd heard, mentioned, I heard the Lur had about 20 times more troops than you. Ashya corrected him, it felt more like 50 times, as my father had to stop them over and over again. With a humble tone, she added, I know you've received the blessing of Aguirre, the god of war, so this may be a bit embarrassing to say in front of you, but I believe my father was a god-sent warrior. Carlisle, smiling warmly, replied, I have no intention of denying that. If someone won a war against a force 20 times larger than their own, they would indeed be a warrior granted by the gods. He gently placed a hand on Ashya's shoulder and, with sincerity in his voice, said, you may not believe me, but I truly respect your father, Emir Pervaz, as a true knight. It's just a shame that the first person your father encountered from the royal family was my father. Ashya was taken aback, never expecting someone from the royal family to express such admiration for her father. As they continued walking deeper into the castle, Carlisle suddenly stopped and asked, aren't there any portraits of Emir Pervaz or your family? Ashya replied, we've gone through 28 years of war. When would we have had the time to paint portraits? Carlisle explained, it's the artist who takes the time to paint, not the model. You only need to sit for half a day per week. Ashya nodded, understanding, but raised a practical concern. What painter would come all the way to Pervaz to paint a portrait? This place isn't exactly safe for outsiders. Carlisle conceded, true, but like it or not, we'll need to get a portrait done sooner or later. Records of the royal family should be kept and hung in the castle. Ashya was puzzled. Why in the world would we need to hang it in the castle? Carlisle, with a playful glint in his eye, asked, if there's no portrait, how will I be remembered? He added teasingly, and just so you know, destroying the portrait is not allowed, even if you run out of firewood. It's for future generations to see. Ashya couldn't help but think that Carlisle, with his larger-than-life presence, would certainly be remembered, portrait or not. She wondered to herself, will someone like him ever remember me just by looking at a portrait? She quickly concluded that there was no way. Carlisle didn't seem like the type who would bother with portraits for the sake of the archives. In the capital, within the hallowed walls of the temple, High Priest Owen gave his solemn permission to begin the meeting. The atmosphere was tense as one of the priests voiced his concerns. It has been 3 months since Carlisle left for Pervaz. Shouldn't we do something? The priest's voice carried a mixture of disdain and frustration. Carlisle's integrity towards God is questionable. He never visits the temple, he's arrogant, and worse, he even coveted his father's mistress. His sins are far too numerous to let slide. High Priest Gabriel sat quietly for a moment, his thoughts heavy with the weight of the Empire's sins. In his mind, Carlisle Evaristo was not the only issue. He saw the nobles of the Empire as generally arrogant and corrupt. He thought to himself. They easily trample on the hearts of others, just as they've trampled on mine. The Church of Flame is the only path to salvation. Gabriel's inner voice echoed with conviction. Everyone is equal before God. The scriptures were clear, there should be no discrimination based on origin, status, or wealth. Yet, the Empire was drowning in corruption, far from the righteous path God had intended. Gabriel paused, catching himself before he went too far in his thoughts. Raising his voice, he addressed the priests in the meeting with authority. We don't have time to list all of Carlisle's sins here, but make no mistake, we will establish a holy empire. And to do so, we must help Matthias ascend the throne. At the same time, we must destroy the public's favorable opinion of His Highness Carlisle. A few days later, Cecilia Dupret began her journey to Pervaz with a determined resolve. Before she departed, her eldest brother, Alan Dupret, couldn't resist mocking her. Why are you even going to Pervaz? He sneered. There are no macaroons there, and no high society to indulge in. Alan's words struck a nerve, and Cecilia snapped back, why would I need those trivial things? They only matter once I become the crown princess. I'm going where I'm needed most, to ensure that happens. Dylan Dupret, the second child of the Dupret family, found his sister's ambition just as toxic. Who would even like you with that attitude? He muttered under his breath. Cecilia, however, was unfazed. She had long accepted the reality of her situation. Her brothers inherited the family's privileges simply by being born sons. They could never understand her struggles. For her, aligning herself with Carlisle Evaristo and helping him become emperor was her only path to becoming empress. As soon as Cecilia arrived in the capital, Raffald informed Carlisle, the thing the Dupret family was sending as proof of their loyalty has finally arrived at Pervaz Castle. Carlisle, curious and slightly amused, ordered, bring it to the office. Moments later, Bailey opened the door, and Cecilia entered the room with a pleasing smile. Carlisle's eyes widened slightly in surprise upon seeing her. He hadn't expected the proof of loyalty to be Cecilia herself. Cecilia confidently addressed Carlisle, stating, as a proof of our loyalty mentioned in the letter, I am here to aid your highness. Carlisle, who had been pondering the letter's implications, replied with a hint of skepticism, when I received that letter, I wondered if your family intended to take something from us. But instead, it seems they've sent you to keep an eye on us. Cecilia smiled, unfazed by his directness. How exactly can you help us, Cecilia? Carlisle asked, curiosity creeping into his voice. Your Highness, Cecilia began, are you familiar with the Dupret family's dovetail? Carlisle nodded, I've heard of it. It's the largest dove training center in the Empire, known for being the fastest way to spread news and communicate between people. Cecilia's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. Exactly. Dovetail is famous for training elite dove messengers. Carlisle smirked. Indeed, I may have only heard of Dovetail, but I am very familiar with its capabilities. Cecilia leaned in slightly. I can put the full services of Dovetail in your hands, your highness. Carlisle raised an eyebrow, impressed but cautious. You're saying you'll raise doves here, for us, by yourself? If that's what it takes, yes, Cecilia confirmed. While you're in Pervaz, it must be challenging to stay updated with all the events in the capital. I can help bridge that gap. And there's something else I wanted to share, recent rumors spreading in the capital. People are beginning to compare Prince Matthias to you. More and more are starting to doubt your highness' capabilities. Carlin's expression darkened slightly, but Cecilia continued. He's also been under constant assassination threats from an early age, using that as a way to garner sympathy and paint himself as the more resilient leader. Bailey, clearly incredulous, exclaimed, "Are you telling me that we're the ones under assassination threats, and yet they're twisting reality like this? It's unbelievable." Raffled, his expression grim, demanded, "Who the hell has been spreading these outrageous and false rumors?" Cecilia, with a steely gaze, responded, "According to Dovetail's intelligence, we heavily suspect priest Elihism. It turns out His Majesty was recently recommended to appoint him as a new court official. We've discovered that he's been misusing his influence, collaborating with Deputy Gabriel Knox." Bailey and Raffled exchanged determined glances. "We need to immediately assess the extent of the Church's influence over the imperial court," Raffled declared with urgency. He then turned to Carlisle. "The Pope is known for his conservative and cautious nature. It's highly unusual for him to be involved in something like this." Carlin's eyes narrowed in understanding. "So, it's Gabriel Knox who's orchestrating this conspiracy behind everyone's back." Turning to Cecilia, Carlisle said with genuine appreciation, "I will be very grateful if you continue to keep me informed like this." Cecilia bowed slightly, her voice unwavering. "I promise, Your Highness, I will never betray you and will be at your service whenever you need me." Carlisle felt a wave of reassurance at her words and welcomed her warmly. "Lady Cecilia, I officially welcome you to Pervaz. Things are a bit challenging here at the moment. Will you be alright with that?" Cecilia nodded with determination. "I came all the way here with that in mind." Carlisle ordered Bailey, "Give Cecilia a room on the second floor." Turning back to Cecilia, he added, "I'll make sure to bring the Countess of Pervaz, the owner of this castle, to greet you later." Cecilia's heart lifted at this news. It was her first chance to meet Ashya, and she was eager to establish a solid relationship from the start. After a while, Ashya entered Carlin's office, visibly sweaty from her work. Carlisle, looking slightly concerned, said, "I apologize for calling you when you're busy, Ashya. I just wanted to introduce you to our new guest." Cecilia, standing by Carlin's side, formally introduced herself. "Lady Ashya, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Cecilia Dupret." Ashya, noting Cecilia's disheveled appearance, remarked, "You must have had a tough journey getting here. The road to the castle is still under maintenance." Cecilia replied with a wry smile, "I was determined to come here, so I'm fine. Although, the carriage rattled so much that my maids ended up feeling quite nauseous." Ashya nodded in understanding and asked, "Where will you be staying?" Carlisle interjected, "I've decided to give Cecilia a room on the second floor." Cecilia added, "I understand that my room is on the first floor, and I hope it's not an issue sharing the floor with His Highness." Ashya responded straightforwardly, "As Carlin's guest, it's only natural for him to decide where you stay. The first floor wouldn't be suitable for you anyway." Carlisle then asked, "Are you still staying in that cold room, Ashya?" With a smile, Ashya replied, "I've never considered it a cold room. To me, it's quite luxurious." Carlisle chuckled, "In that case, I could send some of the furniture I brought and have my maids help with the decoration. It's only fair, considering Lady Dupret will have a better room." Ashya waved off the suggestion, "That's not necessary. I'm fine as it is." Before she could leave, Carlisle called out, "Oh, Ashya, before you go, join us for dinner tonight." Ashya paused, looked back, and gave a slight nod. "Of course, Your Highness. I'll see you then." Cecilia was stunned and bewildered as she realized that despite their contractual marriage, Ashya appeared to regard her with complete indifference. She was baffled by Ashya's apparent confidence. Was it because she was currently married to Carlisle, even though their marriage was destined to end soon? To make matters worse, Ashya seemed utterly detached from Carlisle, almost as if she had no interest in him at all. Cecilia, grappling with this disconcerting realization, could only wonder if Ashya's demeanor was a sign of deeper confidence or perhaps even a calculated disinterest. Determined to not be overshadowed, Cecilia resolved to prove her worth and ensure that when Carlisle ultimately ascended to the throne, he would see her as the one deserving of his side. Meanwhile, in Raffles's office, the atmosphere was thick with fury. Raffles's anger was palpable as he brooded over Cecilia's untimely arrival in Pervaz. He had hoped that Carlisle would be drawing closer to Countess Ashya, but recent developments had been anything but promising. To Raffles, Cecilia was no different from the current empress, greedy and unworthy of the title. His vision for an empress was someone calm, composed, and humble. Unable to tolerate the threat Cecilia posed, Raffles took decisive action and summoned his daughter, Dorothea, to Pervaz without delay. A few days later, Dorothea Raffles received a stern and urgent letter from her father, demanding her immediate presence in Pervaz. Faced with her father's uncompromising directive, Dorothea had no choice but to comply and prepare for the journey.